Hello everyone, welcome to Linux. Today we are going to discuss what is Linux, why Linux is better, Linux in cloud environment, Linux innovation, Linux distributions, it means different flavors, why Red Hat Linux, Red Hat popularity, why Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, Linux architecture, and finally what is shell and kernel. Let me explain first what is Linux. And before going to discuss, everyone must understand what is an operating system. It is an interface between user and hardware, or somebody is calling the collection of system programs. But here, Linux is an open source operating system and IT infrastructure platform. Open source. Any user can modify this Linux open source code according to user ideas and user requirements. That is the meaning of open source. It was originally developed by Linus Torvalds in 1991. So finally, who is the founder of Linux? Linus Torvalds. But the first version released in 1994, the heart of the OS is the Linux kernel. But everyone must understand kernel component. A kernel is a core component of Linux operating system, which is mainly coordination possible between user and hardware. But every operating system has a kernel. Unix has kernel, Linux has kernel, Windows has kernel, Android has a kernel, and every operating system has a kernel. So that's why kernel is a core component of any operating system, not only Linux. And Linux can be used as a server or a desktop. So in early days, Linux is only in server side. So now in both sides, like even client side and server side is the what Linux. Even different flavors, like in the enterprise applications, like Oracle Enterprise Linux, Red Hat Linux, Fedora, SUSE Linux, and different flavors in the server side. And especially in the desktop editions, nowadays the good distributor is Ubuntu. And the Linux is the layer between applications and hardware. But finally, Linux is an open source operating system. And what is the license of Linux? That is copyleft licenses. Linux is released under the GNU, General Public License. Short form is GPL, which means anyone can run, study, share, and modify the software. The modified code can also be redistributed and even sold, but must be done so under the same license. And lesser GNU public license, which means the LGPL, the GNU lesser public license is a free software license published by the Free Software Foundation. The short form is FSF. Why Linux is better? Very few important points why Linux is better. Linux protects your computer, means it is a secure based operating system and a reporting bugs and freedom operating system. So it means it is an open source operating system, enjoy free and unlimited support, and don't pay dollars for your OS. This is also one more important point to avoid massive investments in the organization. So no need to pay dollars for your OS. That is the what main point. Annoying crosses and reboots. It's not taking like automatic crosses, automatic reboots, automatic shutdown like in Linux environment. Linux is everywhere and too many windows use workspaces in Linux environment. So a lot of reasons why Linux is better, but very few points here. The big points are it is a secure based operating system and open source operating system. And now trending is Linux is cloud. Linux in cloud. When it comes to cloud environment, when will you talking about cloud environment, even Microsoft Azure, more than 60% of the images on the Azure marketplace and nearly 1 by third of virtual machines are Linux based. So you want to create any instance in the cloud environment. So more than 60% images are in public repositories, only Linux instances. In meanwhile, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Oracle Platform, and Citrix, and Rackspace are many cloud providers offering multiple distributions of Linux in their publicly available images. So here images means pre-configured templates, pre-configured images. So every cloud environment, in any cloud environment, more than 60% images are only Linux images, not only any specific distributors. So like Red Hat, Ubuntu, Fedora, CentOS, SUSE Linux, like different distributors offering Linux images over publicly in cloud environment. So that's why somebody is saying cloud means almost Linux platform. So there is no cloud computing without Linux platform. Then what about Linux future extensibility? Somebody is thinking like, sir, Linux is maybe yesterday and today or tomorrow. Then what about day after tomorrow position? So don't think like that because Linux continues to be the operating system of the future, even with more and more systems depending on its stability and extensibility. So Red Hat 4 in early days, Red Hat 5, Red Hat 6, Red Hat 7, now Red Hat 8. So day by day, lot of release under the what Linux operating system. So that's what I'm saying. Linux is a continues to be the operating system of the future, not only in the current generation, the coming future also. The all applications almost running on Linux operating system and the Linux innovation. The Web 2.0 built on top of Linux. The cloud revolution was founded on Linux only. See, this is the beautiful point. The cloud revolution was founded on Linux operating system only. Even big data solutions, software based storage appliances, and software enabled networking are completely based on Linux only. So you want to run big data solutions, you want to run storage appliances, and you want to run databases applications. So almost people thinking about Linux operating system only. But now the trending applications in the market, microservices and containerized applications and satellite applications and even many open source applications running around Linux platform only. So the innovations of the future will be built using Linux. And what are the Linux distributions? So generally, Linus Torvalds released Linux open source code. The founder is Linus Torvalds. That guy what says any user can modify my Linux open source code according to user ideas and user requirements. Simply, the meaning of open source is Linux kernel plus additional software. So here we are talking about, so based on Linux open source code, some peoples are released different flavors of operating systems. So different Linux distributions with different goals and criteria for selecting and supporting the software. Simply Linux kernel plus additional software. Each distribution can have a different focus. But the popular distributions in Linux environment right now, the popular distributions are Red Hat, CentOS, Fedora, Oracle Enterprise Linux, Ubuntu, MintOS, OpenSUSE, Arch Linux, Kali Linux, and Mandriva. So these are the what popular distributions under the what Linux. But so hundreds of operating systems under the Linux. But in the market, the very popular distributors are Red Hat, CentOS, OEL, Oracle Enterprise Linux, and in the desktop editions, Ubuntu. These are very popular operating systems right now in the market. But sir, so many distributions under the Linux. But why Red Hat Linux, especially in the production environment? And first of all, let me explain what is Red Hat. Red Hat is an American multinational software company providing open source software products to the enterprise community. Please understand this point. Why Red Hat is popular? Red Hat offers only open source software products, especially for enterprise community and enterprise applications only. But it was founded in 1993. Red Hat has its corporate headquarters in Raleigh and North Carolina with other offices worldwide. So the main branch is North Carolina. And why Red Hat Linux? Red Hat Enterprise Linux is the world's leading enterprise Linux platform. It is an open source operating system. And right now, Red Hat supports more than 10 million plus projects like Red Hat Enterprise products and virtualizations and cloud applications, microservice applications are like different products under the what Red Hat. So right now, as per analysis, Red Hat offers more than 10 million plus projects are under Red Hat Linux. It is the foundation from which you can scale existing applications and roll out emerging technologies across bare metal, virtual servers, containers, and all type of cloud environments. And where exactly Red Hat popularity? So especially the Red Hat products are under banking sectors, airlines, telecoms, healthcare. So right now, these four guys are big production peoples in the market. So even these guys are very satisfied with what Red Hat products. Now you are talking about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So Red Hat 5, Red Hat 6, Red Hat 7, now Red Hat 8 is the what latest edition. But what is the specialty of Red Hat 8? Any workload and any cloud environment, only one OS, which is Red Hat 8. So here, this is not my statement. This statement from the what Red Hat. Any cloud, any workload, only one OS, which is Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. Because Red Hat 8 is very intelligent and matured operating system, especially designed for cloud applications. So now Red Hat 8 supports 100% the latest trending applications. Now just observe. The modern IT is hybrid IT. Hybrid IT environment. You know that. So public cloud, private cloud, like even that hybrid cloud. So hybrid is nothing but the composition of public and private cloud. So the modern IT infrastructure completely it is a hybrid environment. But turning a sprawling ecosystem into a true hybrid environment requires an intelligent operating system that makes those things possible. That was is Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So what I'm saying here, the modern IT infrastructure is hybrid IT environment. So hybrid means like it is called what composition of public cloud environment, mixed clouds, public environment, private cloud environment, like different environments right now in the what IT sectors. But you want to run any critical applications or you want to run database applications or any ecosystems, but you requires one intelligent operating system, that is only Red Hat 8. And traditional data centers to public cloud services to a true hybrid environment requires a few things like scaling as needed. So you want to scale your applications like from in and out. You want to add resources, you want to reduce the resources, and moving workloads seamlessly, developing and managing applications that run anywhere. So in that kind of situations, we need one intelligent operating system. So that is one and only Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 operating system. So there is an only one operating system that makes those things possible, which is RHEL 8. So ultimately, what I'm saying, RHEL 8 is very intelligent and matured operating system, especially designed for high-end applications like cloud applications, satellite applications, and like it is called what container-based applications or any kind of workloads. Then, what is Linux architecture? So every Linux operating system has four layers: user layer, shell layer, kernel layer, and hardware layer. So generally, you know that user and hardware layer. So user is nothing but who uses available hardware and software resources, just like who is managing the computer. And hardware means like CPU, kernel, mouse, keyboard, hard disk, like everything is the what like a hardware. And these two layers are common layers in any operating system. Now you are talking about the very important two layers about shell and kernel. Then what is a shell? A shell is like a container. Remember everyone, a cell is like a container. Yes, what that container contains, Unix or Linux commands. So every command executes from the container only. So means the user if you execute any command, every command from the container which is has been under the what cell. An interface between users and kernel, it is nothing but operating system. And in Linux, we usually mean a command line shell. Please remember guys, here two types of cells in the environment, but every cell offers commands only. Every cell offers different features with commands only. But in Linux environment, the users usually use command line shell only because you are executing commands through CLI mode. So that's why command line shells only be recommended. The shell program is replaceable on a user by user basis. And the default shell in Linux is bash, the GNU born again shell. Like what I'm saying here, different types of shells in the Linux, like Bourne shell, bash shell, corn shell, jet shell, C shell, TCS shell, no login shell, like it's called what? Hundreds of shells in the market. But very popular shells are just 5 to 10 shells only. But compared to 5 to 10 shells, the best shell is bash shell. So this bash shell is default in Linux. If you execute any command, that commands from the bash shell. It enables easy remote and automated administration. The shell is most commonly used to run commands. Please remember here 3 points are important. What are the 3 points? First, a shell is like a container. That container contains Unix or Linux commands. First point. And the shell is most commonly used to run commands only. But what is the default shell in Linux environment? Which is bash shell. The bash full form is born again shell. But this born shell is developed by Stephen Bourne. And now let me explain what are the types of shells in Linux. GNOME, GNU Network Object Model Environment, and KDE, that is K Desktop Environment. Actually, Linux offers two types of desktops, GNOME Desktop and KDE Desktop. These two are the what GUI shells. And then, and different command line shells are Bourne shell, bash shell, corn shell, C shell, jet shell, like different types. But the very popular shell is bash shell in Linux. But sir, how can you find which shell in your OS? Like find your shell, echo space $0 is the command to find your shell. Okay, for example, I want to execute this command. So this is my Red Hat Linux operating system. So I'm logged in with root user. But in the next lecture, I will explain how to install Linux operating system. But here I'm running the command echo space $0 is the command to find your current shell. So what is my shell here? Which is bash. So bash shell is default in Linux operating system. And bash shell is very powerful compared to other shells. Then the next important thing, Linux kernel. So I told you just now, kernel is a heart of Linux operating system, which means it is a core component of Linux operating system. The kernel is the essential center of a computer operating system. So every operating system has a kernel, not only Linux. Every Windows has a kernel, every Linux has a kernel, every Unix has a kernel, every Mac has a kernel, every Android has a kernel. So every operating system has a kernel. Without kernel, there is no operating system because everything is controlled by kernel only in operating system. It was interface between shell and hardware. So where is the kernel? The kernel sitting interface between shell and hardware. But what the kernel does? Scheduling running programs, managing hardware, managing memory, manages system security, supports user programs, device drivers, networking, and lot of things. So the simple point is everything is controlled by kernel. So these are all programs, these are all things are controlled by kernel only. So that's why it is a kernel is a core component of operating system. Then what is user space and processes? So again, in that case, process is very important thing. User space consists of all processes running outside the kernel. So what is the user space? Please understand here the point. The user space consists of all processes running outside the kernel. The programs will execute outside the programs will running outside the kernel. The user space consists of all processes but running outside the kernel. But what is a process? The very simple definition, a process is a program under execution. Or instance of a running program is called as a process. If you execute any command, so like in the Linux environment, if I run the program, if I execute the command date, it is a one process. If I execute the what Firefox command, then it is a process. So everything is a what one process in the Linux. But in that case, what I'm saying, if you execute any process, but each process has its own a private virtual memory space, a security context, a state of a process, and a process ID number. But every process ID number is unique in Linux. That's why people are calling Linux is a process-based operating system, but Windows is thread-based operating system. So what is the difference? Windows is a thread-based operating system and Linux is a process-based operating system. Because if you execute any program in Linux environment, everything its own private virtual memory space and it contains a state of process and every process has a one unique ID number. And what are the types of processes? So here is the word user process, daemon process, and kernel thread process. Okay, three types of processes in the environment. And generally, how to find a process in the Linux environment? So simply here is the word ps is the command to list the what are the processes running in your machine.